Hey guys, welcome back to the Fertility Confidence Podcast. Thank you so much for hitting play today. A very special interview because this is actually my first team member interview, which is really exciting. So Taryn comes on the podcast today to talk a little bit about PMS, the different types of PMS, and how we can be supporting our bodies, specifically using nutrition and food. She's our registered holistic nutritionist and our nutrition coach inside Fertility Confidence Method, as well as a holistic nutritionist inside our Ontario Virtual Wellness Clinic, Cared for Wellness, which is super exciting. Taryn also has a new program launching, and you can find out a little bit more about her over on Instagram at Happily Holistic Health. But we had a wonderful conversation about PMS that I actually got a little bit vulnerable and shared some of my personal experience that I haven't shared on the podcast before. So maybe we'll have to do a couple of episodes or blog posts about that coming down the pipeline. But Taryn has such a kind, beautiful soul and heart, which is why I love working with her. I love having her a part of the team. She has so much amazing knowledge to contribute, and she's such a nurturing person. She really does care so deeply about her clients. And yeah, I just really enjoy spending time in her presence. So hopefully this one's not very fertility specific, but hopefully you enjoy. So one of the things that we really touched on actually is how tracking your PMS and understanding what symptoms are cyclical for you can actually really help us from a fertility aspect in terms of picking up on the cues that your body is giving you. We are so often told that PMS is just normal. We're supposed to feel like that once a month. And people, Taryn and I kind of giggle because, our whole lives, people made a joke about it, right? Like, oh, she's just PMSing or she must be on her period. But the truth of the matter is that we shouldn't have large overt symptoms cycle to cycle. Yeah, we're not going to feel our best. We're definitely going to feel a little bit more tired. Our body's going to want us to slow down. And that's all very normal leading in through our luteal phase. But those strong PMS symptoms, which we talk a little bit about in the episode, those are things that we want to be paying a little bit closer attention to. What red flags, according to hormones, are coming through our body cycle after cycle, and also, take the fertility side out of it. Let's support your body so that we don't actually have to deal with these symptoms cycle to cycle. So thank you again for being here. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and make sure you like and subscribe for more. Hey, Taryn, welcome to the Fertility Confidence Podcast.
Hi, so excited.
Yay. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about you, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm a holistic nutritionist. I started, as most people do, I feel like, because of my own history with hormone imbalance, and especially the pill and kind of coming off of that. Long story short, went off the pill almost 4 years ago now, after just having a lot of issues, like hormone wise and otherwise. And also just learning a lot more about the potential side effects and long-term effects of long-term birth control use and oral contraceptive use. And so a few months after coming off the pill, I got everything back, my painful cycles, really bad PMS, especially anxiety before my period. And I seek help from my naturopath and my own education through nutrition. And yeah, obviously I'm not feeling that way anymore, but it was not a short journey, but yeah, because of that, that's kind of how I got into helping other, especially women and people with periods, with PMS and painful cycles and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about PMS. What is PMS? I know I have a very vivid visual memory back in school of the different categories. And I remember going through it, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of different categories of PMS. And I remember sitting there going, God damn it, I'm in all four.
Yeah.
How did I draw the short straw? It's not fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that a lot for sure. So probably a lot of you already know what PMS is because you probably experience it. Many people do. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to or that it's normal or optimal. And so basically, in case you don't know, PMS stands for premenstrual syndrome, and it's basically characterized by a collection, usually of symptoms that show up before your period in your luteal phase. So if you know the phases of your cycle, it's about the like 10 to 16 days usually before your period. And that's where we tend to see a lot of these symptoms come up. And yeah, so like Kelsey said, there's many categories. Um, there are actually 5. I heard of 4 originally, and then I heard of another one that kind of is less common, fairly recently. And so those are, they shorten them to the letter that they start with just to make it easier. But PMSA, so anxiety, D is depression, H is hyperhydration, basically means like bloating, water retention, that kind of thing. And then you have C for cravings and then P for pain. So that one's probably the least common. But I actually hear about it from people I talk to quite often. So I'm not sure how accurate the stats are for those percentages of how common it actually is. But those are kind of the main 5 types of PMS that you may experience. You may experience all of them. You may experience just one or maybe one more than the other. But yeah,
I think
those are the
something,
kind of top 5.
yeah, I haven't heard of pain being categorized as PMS before, but it makes sense. Like, I think we so commonly associate PMS with like mental emotional symptoms and like I don't want to use the word more mild symptoms because that's not necessarily true, but then we almost like lump pain into this different category, but it's still a piece of the puzzle when we're talking about PMS for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And even within PMS, there are all those categories, but there's also PMDD, which is kind of another battle that's more significant, and that is, I think, becoming more common. And we're kind of getting more and more knowledge about it, but um, it's still kind of lumped under that PMS umbrella when it really is like so much more than that. But definitely worth talking about, I think, because people are going through a lot of the time, they go through those couple weeks and they think they're just crazy and that there's something wrong with them. And there really is a deeper reason always for everything that you're experiencing. So
Mhm.
just to know that you're not crazy and there's probably something going on, and there are ways that we can combat that.
And that like PMS is not just par for the course of having a uterus or a cycle either. And that's
Yeah.
something like I find when I'm sitting with patients and I'm asking them these questions, they almost are like brushing off all of these symptoms because they've had them their whole lives. And I'm like, well, that's not okay.
Mhm.
Like, these actually are things that are telling us something about your body. And we're going to, especially working in the world of fertility, we're going to actually use that to help us guide lab testing and treatment. And if we need to dig deeper in certain areas from like a root cause infertility perspective, like you're tracking your PMS is so important. Let's maybe talk about like tracking. How do you recommend people really when they're kind of saying like, oh, I didn't know these were not normal? Like, what's the first step that you give your clients in terms of figuring out what are their PMS symptoms and where do we maybe go from there?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time people have just symptoms in general, especially like heightened anxiety or depression or headaches or just mood swings in general or cravings, and they are cyclical. They do come kind of once in that cycle. but they don't always recognize that. So they come to me with these symptoms and they're like, I'm going through all of this. And we kind of educate as a first step as to like that there are more phases in your cycle than just your period, because I think even that fact is not well known enough yet, unfortunately, like,
Yeah.
which is part of the reason why we think that these things are why we're feeling crazy, because we don't know that our hormones do fluctuate and that just before our period, they are almost at their lowest, and that can really have an effect on our mood, our energy, our even like physically how we feel, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think just educating on kind of where how to start tracking, I guess, is super important, because we often think of our cycle as just our period, and there there's so much more than that. And so I usually say like start with your period, because that's the easiest one to identify usually, and kind of go from there. In between, there's a ton of other cues that our body gives us based on what's going on. But start with your period, because that's the easiest. And even just seeing how long the bleed is, or how long your body takes to get from the first day of your period to the next first day of your period, and that can also tell us a lot. So yeah, that's typically what I recommend, is just like learning about your body and how it works first of all. And I think that's really validating too, to just know that you're allowed to feel different ways at different times of the month, and that part is normal.
Yeah,
to
totally.
feel different ways. Yeah.
We're not going to feel the same every single day,
No.
like society expects us to.
Yeah,
Something that
exactly.
was really surprising for me on my personal like hormone journey is I didn't have a lot of PMS prior to kids. And then after was like fairly severe. Um, got better, got worse, got better, got worse. And my journey kind of has led me to being diagnosed with PMDD last year. Which it's funny that you mentioned that, because we actually had, after you left in our, Taryn is a part of our FCM team. And so after you left our meeting on Monday, we actually talked, the other NDs and I, about setting up a PMDD screener like in our software, so that we're more better prepared to actually screen women for PMDD, because it's a huge ball being dropped. And you had mentioned, it's being more recognized and diagnosed. And I think that, we probably have had a lot higher numbers of PMDD, but women aren't getting caught, right? It's not being screened for properly. So that is a story for another time, but something that was very surprising for me through my journey, especially after having Nyla, my second, is my PMS symptoms starting at ovulation. And even knowing what I know, I was still, taken aback by like, why is this happening so early? Why do I have to deal with this for so long? And that is actually what got the very long drawn out process for me. And not because of the medical system, but because I was being stubborn in terms of getting my formal diagnosis. So that's something else to think about too, that you might actually get symptoms more so around ovulation, because there's that huge spike and fall and like transition from estrogen to progesterone being dominant. And that can be really hard on the body too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because yeah, like I said, it is more recognized now for PMDD, but it's still not, we're not aware enough about it. I don't think. I had posted something once about it on Instagram. I think I just reshared actually from someone else. And I had someone DM me saying like, oh my God, I think I have this. And like, I thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And so just even knowing that it exists, and not even having the diagnosis, but knowing that there is something that kind of like describes how you're feeling and validates that for you, I think is just, yeah, it's so helpful in
Mhm.
getting the help and getting potentially a diagnosis, or supporting your body in other ways to reduce your symptoms in general.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it definitely needs to be talked about a lot more.
Yeah, agreed. And I
Yeah.
think, like, I love how you say, like, validating your experience, because I think that even just putting a name to it and knowing, like, oh, I am not crazy, like, this is an actual thing, helps you to then vocalize what you need in that moment. And that was my experience of, like, I was very shut off about, I knew what was going on. I knew I had PMDD. I knew, and I was working through it in therapy, but I was doing some supplementation, but I wasn't doing anything else, and I wasn't reaching out for any sort of pharmaceutical support, and I was very much battling that concept, but I also wasn't sharing with anyone. This is actually the first time I've openly really talked about it. And so I wasn't sharing it with Tyler. And it finally, working through it in therapy, and finally just accepting the fact that this was happening and this is my body right now. And it's not maybe a forever thing, but it's something that I'm working through, and being able to actually sit down and explain to him, this is what's going on, this is why it's happening, and this is what I'm doing to help myself, but this is what I also need you to do to help me. And truly, it just is like, I just need some extra space, like, in those moments. And so by having the label, by having the diagnosis, if that's what you need to approach your circle of support, to say, hey, I need a little bit more from you to, like, man the house and hold down the fort, or, like, let me just be alone, or don't leave me alone, like, whatever you need in those moments. If that helps you to feel comfortable having those conversations. And I want to say that's true if you have PMDD or not. Like, if you're just dealing with PMS and it's enough that it impacts you, like, let's be more open with that being a legitimate piece that we need support with, and not just like a fake diagnosis, right? Because I feel like we hear that sometimes, that it's not real, but it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and along with that, like, everyone just thinks it's normal, and we grow up, I feel like, hearing jokes about it, and
Mhm.
she's just on her
Oh, she's
period,
just
or she's
PMSing. Yeah.
PMSing. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And while like, okay, like, haha, maybe humor's a way to like get
Yeah.
through it sometimes, but also it can be more serious, and I think having even, yeah, just that kind of list of, even if it's not an exact diagnosis, it's having that list of things that basically lay out how you're feeling. It helps you get help from your community and your support system, family, friends wise, but also helps you find potentially a practitioner who can help you, who
Yeah.
maybe is more specialized in that, rather than just your like general practitioner or family doctor, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Because they can be helpful, absolutely, but they don't always know everything about what you're going through. Number one, no one knows exactly what you're going through, but sometimes people understand more than others, and sometimes people, just with their education and their life experience, they know a little bit more about some things than other topics. So I think that's really important too, to be able to just direct your search a little bit more efficiently to someone who can help you more quickly than trying to kind of Google it and
Yeah.
go it on your own.
Totally.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how nutrition comes into play here. So if people listening are like, yep, absolutely, I have PMS and I have multiple categories, like, how do you help someone with food?
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of depends on the type. Um, really briefly, something like PMS could be could be higher estrogen, lower progesterone, lower serotonin. And so how we would support someone's body with nutrition for that versus even something like PMSD, which is the depression kind of circle of things, that may be more gut health support and that kind of thing. So in general, there are absolutely a few things that we always focus on first. But it really depends on your symptoms and the order that we kind of go in. But like realistically, there are going to be similar things for everyone. And really big ones are supporting gut health, like I said, especially if you're having symptoms like depression, anxiety, any kind of mood issues, mood swings, mood disorders, anything like that. Gut health is going to be so important. There's a ton of research now coming out about the mind gut connection and everything there. And so using things like potentially fermented foods and fiber and things that you hear all the time, but may not necessarily know how to work that into your daily routine. That's really important. Reducing inflammation is huge, especially if you're experiencing pain, but also just in general for your hormones. Reducing inflammation, a lot of omega-3 fatty acids if you can, if you can't, potentially supplementing, which is important to chat with someone if you're going to consider that. But salmon, trout, sometimes walnuts and chia seeds, things like that can be really anti-inflammatory for people. Liver support is huge. Another one, especially if we are dealing with symptoms of higher estrogen levels, we want to really be eliminating toxins in general and also excess hormones, because those are also processed through the liver, which a lot of people don't know. But the liver is really important to produce and detoxify hormones from the body. So if you can tolerate things like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, those kind of things, they can be supportive of liver detox. If you can't, then we need to chat a little bit more, because sometimes it's not just the food, but like garlic, onions, those are also great. Lemon, but citrus, even if it's just like in your water, just to support a little bit more. The liver is kind of controversial for some people, because everyone says, well, like the liver detoxes all the time, it does it on its own. But the reality is that the world that we're living in right now, sometimes the liver needs a little bit of a boost and a little bit extra support doing its job. So we can do that through food first, at least. And then if that doesn't work, we can go a little bit deeper. But I would say those are kind of the biggest parts of hormone health in general, is reducing inflammation, support gut health, support your liver. Yeah. And that's just nutrition. Obviously, we have lifestyle and everything within that, which I also talk about with my clients and the people that I work with, because although I'm a nutritionist, it's not always just about the food. And if your mindset and your stress management and your lifestyle in general isn't there to support your body and your hormones, then nothing is going to improve. And that's honestly the hardest. I always tell people that's the hardest part. We can change your diet, I can give you a meal plan, but if there's not some work being done mindset wise and with your heart, at the risk of sounding cheesy, like with your heart and your soul, then you're probably not gonna see the results that you thought you might.
Well, I think a lot of us don't think deeply enough about how much stress impacts the way our body digests our food in general. And so, we are so, myself included, like so quick to blame the food when we should probably look at the environment in which we're eating and our mental environment in which we're eating. I was laughing the other day because the kids were crazy and I was like standing at the counter shoveling my food into my mouth, like yelling at them to hurry up because we had to get out the door to go to swimming. And I get in the car and I was like, I feel so sick, but it's probably because like my stomach was by no means in a healthy digestive
Yeah.
state in the 3 minutes I was just trying to feed it.
Yeah.
And that's on me, like that's my own poor time management. But I could have said, "Oh, shoot, I can't eat pesto anymore,"
Yeah.
like, and we're so quick to try to find the easy thing to blame. And
Mhm.
I do it I still do it all the time. Like, "Oh, maybe I can't eat that anymore." And then I'll have to say, like, "Kelsey, let's actually logically think this through a little bit." That the environment in which we're eating our food greatly impacts the way that our body digests it. And how I've been explaining to some of our fertility clients is like, think of all the amazing foods you're eating to help support your body and to like pump up your antioxidants and improve your egg quality. If you're not digesting that well and not absorbing that well, like it's not that it's not doing nothing for you, but it's definitely not giving you the best bang for your buck. Like we really want to be cautious there. So on that note, what are some tips you could maybe give for all of us on like proper eating environment to help optimize digestion? Because I think that's something that I'm not the only one that struggles with that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not. And it's a good point too because stress wise, that's one of the most common reasons why we have hormone imbalances in general and things like PMS and painful periods especially. Um so yeah, that's kind of the trigger for a lot of people because digestion doesn't happen as efficiently, which means, like you said, we're not absorbing things, we're not getting the nutrients that we think we're getting. And along with digestion, one of the other first things to go under stress is reproductive functions, right? That's just comes down to fight or flight. Like with if we had to run away from something, we don't need to digest something or make a
Make a
baby. Like
baby.
those are not priorities. And so
Breathing and
yeah,
pumping blood.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean digestion is super important and supporting that with how we're eating, with what we're eating as well, but how we're eating can be even more helpful sometimes. So you probably heard of mindful eating before. May or may not kind of know what that looks like, and it's going to look a little bit different for everyone, but essentially trying to eat without distractions when you can. So, if you can, not eating at your desk, not with the TV on, not reading a book or doing anything other than sitting down and chewing your food, which I feel hypocritical saying because I am not good at that. It is still a practice, but that can be one way to optimize your digestion. Eating a little bit in, I mean, you're going to eat a bit slower if you eat that way, anyways. But just being mindful of how quickly you're eating and if you're actually chewing your food, because that'll help with digestion and also actually absorbing the nutrients eventually. Um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big one. Um, as far as how you're eating stress wise, I mean, doing something that you love every day is what I usually tell people. If your brain is kind of one that goes at nighttime, especially, I get people to like do a brain dump before bed, write down everything that's on your mind, and just that'll just help throughout the day with managing stress, and that'll help with digestion and making choices too about what you're eating. um sleep and sleep and stress, and that all impacts your choices throughout the day, food wise or otherwise. But nutrition wise, it's a lot easier to grab something quickly when we're super stressed and lack of sleep, and physiologically, like our hormones are different when we have less sleep. And so it's much easier to go and grab something from McDonald's or wherever than it would be to make a full meal. And
Mhm.
I think we didn't really talk about blood sugar, but that's kind of another one that's
Mhm.
really big for PMS, um, that we want to support. So your blood sugar gets thrown off, you're going to have more cravings, you're going to probably be more anxious, your whole body is just going to be unhappy. So I kind of will add that one to my other three tips about nutrition. Um, but yeah, stress impacts your blood sugar, sleep impacts your blood sugar. So lifestyle wise, that's kind of impacting your blood sugar levels, which is going to impact your food choices, which is going to impact your blood sugar levels. And so it's kind of like it can be a vicious cycle. So even just getting like solid on one of those and really focusing in on it, will be so helpful.
Mhm.
You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to go for an hour walk and get 9 hours of sleep and have 4 meals a day and do all these things right off the bat. Like, start with one and go from there.
Yeah. Get good at it and then
Mhm.
add, and then get good at that and then add. Yeah, I love that. Okay. What is one piece of advice that you would love to leave for us? Usually I ask one piece of fertility advice, but PMS advice maybe that you'd like to leave for listeners today.
Yeah, I think it kind of connects to fertility as well, just with your health in general. Like, ask questions and seek out help as soon as you can instead of trying to figure it out on your own. Um, I feel like even with myself and like life wise, business wise, that's been so helpful with moving forward. And yeah, getting that help and getting the support that you need to move forward instead of feeling stuck and just kind of Googling everything and staying in one place. PMS wise, obviously, like seeking out support, to whether that's nutrition, whether that's lifestyle, whether that's otherwise, or fertility too. It's get the help that you deserve because it is out there, and like the answers are out there. Um, so you don't have to try and figure it all out on your own.
Yeah, I love that. Where can people find you, Taryn? Where can they learn more about you?
So I'm mostly on Instagram. My Instagram is happily holistic health. And I work with people one on one. And I also have a new course that is coming out in like a week. So that'll be out November 1st. And you'll be able to access that whenever you decide to join. And yeah, you can get some support for PMS or whatever you're going through to balance your hormones.
Amazing. I'll make sure the link for that's in the show notes, and the link for your Instagram is in the show notes as well. Thank you so, so much for joining us, for educating us, and for sharing some of your insight with
Mhm.
us on PMS.
Yeah. Thanks so much.